Hello, and welcome back to Energetically You. I'm your host, Megan Swan, creator of the Sustainable Integrated Wellness Approach. I am all things healthy habits, abundant mindset, and optimal wellness. This is a special edition of the podcast in that I get to interview two amazing women at the same time. We are talking about our experience with going dry. In their case, it's been for Genevieve, and I'll let her introduce herself. She did that in January. And Candice did, or really is still in the midst, almost finished doing it for February. So thank you so much, ladies, for being here. I appreciate your willingness to do the podcast. So
thanks for having us.
Genevieve, why don't you start, and why don't you give everyone a little bit of background of how we even started hanging out on Zoom every Thursday and your project.
I love this. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, Megan, it's so great to see you ladies. This is has to be one of the wonderful things that has come out of the global health crisis in which we find ourselves. So I'm so excited to be here. So my name is Genevieve Pardoe. I'm the founder of Fallon Publishing, and I'm an indie publisher. I help people write their memoirs as well as their business books. So I also do courses, and the way that we all met each other. Well, Candice and I know each other from way back when, but I was so happy when Megan reached out. She was part, as was Candice, of a beta course that I'm now working on again called Clear the Way. And so what evolved from this was, I think, like an amazing, just kind of female focused space that we now hold for each other. So there's my lengthy introduction, and I'm so happy to be here.
I love it. And tell them about your own podcast while we're doing the intro.
So my podcast is a bit of an extension of my indie publishing company. It's called Grit and Grace. And what I really just wanted to do was tell the stories of exceptional women. I feel very privileged to do so, both on my podcast and through my business. So I have interviewed, it's a huge spectrum. I just finished a really meaningful interview with a woman who wrote a book called Wife, Widow, Now What? It was her experience as her partner suffered from leukemia. And then I've also interviewed yogis and mindset coaches. And so just being able to be the conduit for telling the stories of exceptional women is really a privilege. And you can find me on Instagram. It is called Grit and Grace Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. Candice, tell us as much, as little as you want about your previous projects and what you're currently working on.
Sure. So my name's Candice Lashley. I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. And I've spent the last decade basically planning and catering events, weddings through a high-end catering company. And I've recently launched The Kind Wedding, which is basically a platform for sharing information, tips, DIY for the current wedding couple that's trying to approach their wedding planning process with a bit more kind of consciousness and kindness in mind, whether it's in terms of the environment, their budget, or just trying to sort of survive the wedding planning process with still love in their hearts for their family and friends. So that's what I've been working on with Jen and with Megan. The brainstorming has really helped with that, and that's sort of the new project that's on deck.
Amazing. I love that. And you have so much experience with the ins and outs of, planning events is not always maybe as sexy as we think when we start looking on Pinterest for ideas. There's so many levels below that you need to go to be everything in order and really to enjoy the whole process and not have a stressful event, right?
That's so true.
To get to see more of what you do with that project. So let's turn to the issue of, I mean, to me, I think I'm personally sober. For those of you who don't know, this is coming up. It was the day after St. Patrick's Day. That's how I always remember. So it's coming up pretty soon here on 3 years. And I don't know, I've always been, well, not always, that's a lie. Since deciding that I needed to make this shift, I've been very interested in, there's a lot of literature, a lot of women that have told their stories about sobriety. And I think that the more I am aware of in England, there seems to be a bit stronger sort of narrative and collective of women that talk about just going sober or being sober curious, and not being like anything to do with them, quote unquote, having a drinking problem. It's just a decision for living a better life. And so I think under that umbrella falls these events that lots of organizations do, and some people do them on your own. So let's start with you, Genevieve. Did you just decide, or were you kind of attached to some sort of organization or group of women that was doing the same thing? And what sparked your interest? Is the annual Dry January?
Yeah, thank you. So I had never heard the term sober curious until I met you, and that is exactly what it was. It did happen to be January, but it coincided with me I had a huge workload, so great time to be able to get up at 4 and get up at 5 a.m. and get what I need to do done before my kids wake up. But I also personally have started to have a problem with the mommy drinking culture. And I know I'm not alone with that. And it started to bother me since, especially having my son. I'm on the west coast of Canada. I'm sure it's pervasive everywhere, but I'm starting to hear mommy needs a drink and it's 5 o'clock, and like this idea that you can't parent sober. And if you have ever parented hungover, it's not a treat. But it really honestly started to bother me. And so I guess it was a couple things. So that, the sober curious, also mindful drinking. Again, that's a term I got from you, Megan. I really like that. I really feel in Canadian culture, we're big drinkers, and there's something, we've talked about this before. I'm doing air quotes here if we're not watching the video, but there's something wrong with you if you don't drink. And I really don't like that. I've experienced it. I'm sure I've said, something to that effect, and, back in the day, pre-child, but, so I was really curious, and the level of productivity, wow, it was like unbelievable. I had like a full load of client work, my 2 kids, I took on new clients, I created a course. Like it was just, when you actually go through the experience, it's undeniable the effect that alcohol has on your productivity, your creativity, your mood. Having said that, like I am drinking again, but it's much more mindful. And I never drank every day anyway, but I would say it's much more mindful, and I'm really kind of enjoying it instead of like, it's 5 o'clock, mommy needs a drink. So that's kind of a bit of my experience with it.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think, thank you for your honesty there, because I think there's a lot that we can unpack. I heard, there was a great podcast, I'll share it in the notes. I believe it was on Rich Roll, and I'm forgetting the gentleman's name, but he's in England, and he started this movement called 100 Days Without Beer. I feel like it's Jeff something. Anyway, I'll put it in the notes. And, I think one conversation is definitely around the mommy wine culture. And for me, that was really one of the bigger reasons that I knew I needed to quit. I put myself in the alcoholic category just because I feel like it is a label I don't mind taking on, and it makes the conversation shorter. But I think exactly that. I knew I couldn't parent the way I wanted to parent and continue drinking the way I was drinking, which again, I wasn't drinking daily either. But there was definitely all sorts of behavior that I saw growing up that I swore I would never do. And I saw myself starting to repeat some of these patterns and just, decided that that wasn't okay. For example, I didn't want to wake up and not remember a conversation I'd had with one of my kids that was, any conversation arguably, but like a meaningful conversation for them, and your version of it is foggy. So, I think there's a lot to consider, and I like those terms, mindful drinking and sober curious, because, if I tried for a year, I experimented for a year to see if I could do my version of mindful drinking. And just to define it a little bit, to me, it's, basically putting some rules around it for yourself, sticking to them, and like feeling that they work, so that they, they're like rules, but they're more, suggestions that, or tendencies that you follow. For example, for me, when I did it for a year, it was, I only drank 2 days a week, and it was a maximum of 3 glasses of wine, which for people that don't drink maybe sounds like a lot, but then other people that do drink think that sounds crazy. So that's one of the things that I always found interesting to reflect on. And I think it was last week or the week before, Candice, that we were talking. I remember when I was really drinking quite heavily throughout my 20s and 30s, when I was, single and dating in Toronto. And I came across someone who didn't drink. Like, that was just like a non-negotiable. There was no way I was going to date someone, because it made me feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And that there was this idea that there was something wrong with them. But I mean, there are many cultures in the world that really don't drink at all. And looking back, I had one relationship, very important relationship in my life that was several years, and he sort of drank, but really because it was more socially acceptable to drink, not because he liked drinking, and his family didn't drink at all. And so, there was like a culture clash, really uncomfortable dinner when our parents met, where, like my family's way of getting to know people is, cracking a few bottles of wine and having a nice dinner, and they literally don't drink. And it wasn't like a religious thing. It was just like cultural preference. And for coming from a culture where we're just so in it, and you have like all of these narratives of like what that means about people, it's really interesting how it's really the only drug that we judge people negatively when they don't want to consume it, right?
Or are you pregnant? That's the giveaway. That's right. Oh, why are you not drinking? Are you pregnant?
Yeah, exactly. So Candice, tell us how you came about deciding to do this in February, and how are you doing with it?
Well, I decided, I guess I also have been sober curious. That's my first time hearing that term as well, for some time. And I just realized and almost started to mourn for the amount of time that I was wasting, because by the time you've had that second or third glass of wine after dinner on a Tuesday, you're not cracking open your laptop and doing something. You're barely even going to do the dishes. So then it just then spirals. So then the morning, when you're kind of dragging yourself out of bed, you still have all of that unproductive stuff that you neglected from the night before, and it just backs up. And I was at a time, or still am in a time, where I want to look into new projects and kind of just doing something a little bit more creative, and just not finding the time for it. But then when you look at what your day looks like, and you realize, well, there's actually many hours that you could be doing something that you're choosing to drink instead. And I've been thinking, coming into this conversation, about, how did you kind of end up here? But and I come from I worked in a hospitality background. So in catering and hospitality, alcohol is obviously a big part of it. If you're planning a special occasion, what cocktail are people going to be greeted with? And, what kind of champagne do you want to pop right after the ceremony? And, if you're doing a tasting menu, what wines go well with, this meal? And, it's a big part of it. So you kind of then get into this mindset of, well, an activity needs a beverage, like that kind of goes with it. And that's, I think, fine. I think that would probably fall under the category of mindful drinking. But then when, Tuesday night having a soup and salad after a long day includes, half a bottle of Chardonnay, and a walk in the dog park with a friend means like, oh, I should bring a couple of beers, that then kind of crosses over into something that I think is a bit more problematic. So yeah, I decided, and in January is when I had done Jen's program, and we had started gathering on Zoom, and thinking of all of this stuff. And Jen was doing the dry January, and I managed to rope a couple of friends into doing it as well, so it would just be a little bit easier. And it's been great. I was surprised at how easy it was. There definitely were times where I'm like, somebody pour me a glass of wine already. But it wasn't as frequent as I thought. Sorry. I just realized how many days I don't really need it. Like you can go through the day with a tea instead of a glass of wine. And, being locked up at home helped. You're not kind of out there in the world with a bunch of other people that are giving you that same kind of energy. Like, why aren't you drinking? What's wrong with you? And not having to deal with that has been good. So yeah, I'm planning to go back to mindful drinking. My thought is that if I can drink in moderation and still have it be a part of my life, that I don't have to go cold turkey, I will try to do that. But if I find myself in a month or 2 months from now, consuming the better part of a bottle of wine every night or most nights, then I'm going to have a conversation with myself about just cutting it out altogether.
Yeah, well, that's kind of full disclosure. So I did that for a year, and I'll be honest, going back to your wedding and events point and all that, these stereotypes aren't the right word, but just sort of common understandings about what a party involves and needs to have in order to be a party. I couldn't really, I was still, I got married in February and quit drinking a month later. But I was somewhat consciously aware that I wanted to have that glass of champagne on my wedding day. And like, that was a part of my narrative about what a wedding needs to have. Right. Mm-hmm. And now looking back, there are a bunch of pictures that I hate that everyone has drinks in their hands, right? Including myself. And I can just, now looking back, I can look at a picture of myself and know like exactly how many drinks I probably had in my system on my wedding and other days. Right. But, I think it just came down to like, I was on a really good path with the mindful drinking, but then there was this last drop night for me, last straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, in that it was like repeat behavior that I swore I would not do again. And it was just crossing so many lines for myself. And going back to your point about the social blowback, that was a real concern. And I think, I don't know, you can let me know. I think it's a little bit different. Like you say, we're all at home a lot more right now, but I was surprised that it was more in my head that other people care whether I drink or not. They're much more concerned about whether they're having their drink or not, right? And I literally have never received like a peer pressure comment, if you will, or even what really surprised me is it made me think that my family and friends really knew that I needed to do this, because nobody even asked if I was pregnant or why I'm saying no thank you. Like literally. And like I was all prepared with my speech. And when I first quit, in my mind, I said, I'm like, I'll give it a month, or I'll give it, like I didn't say I'm quitting forever when I quit. But I quickly knew that there was no reason to go back. There's been a few situations, like we went in that June, we were in Greece on an island, and we were on like a tour of a winery. A year later, I went on my honeymoon to the wineries of New Zealand. So all places where it makes a lot of sense to have. And in both scenarios, I literally just smelled the wine and got that and knew, like, I don't know, I just like changed my taste buds a little bit of like everything it meant, that smell. Mm-hmm. And that's how it just became now 3 years. But yeah, can you guys tell me, so we talk about the surprise and extra time. That's a really common thing when clients do detoxes. They're like, I can't believe how much extra time I have not drinking. Because they foresee that they're not going to have time to prepare all this extra food that they don't usually. And in fact, it's like huge plus on time. And the level of productivity, I'm sure easier to wake up in the mornings. Anything else that you noticed that maybe surprised you or that you were anticipating about not drinking for a month?
The Candice touched on it, but for lack of a better word, hangover or spillover, when you drink, I think a lot of people say like, oh, I don't drink. Well, I would, right? Previously, I don't drink every day. Like at max, it was like a glass of wine every other day, but it's not out of your system in 48 hours. It's 72. And when I actually truly removed it, the spillover, like again, pardon the pun, but I'm getting up earlier and I'm more productive, more creative, more present with my kids, more like it just, the energy, like working out more. I'm a runner. And so like the areas that it just like continues to go into, whereas previously I wouldn't have said there's an impact on my running from drinking, because I truly didn't feel it until I saw an impact in my performance. And so I'm running better, longer, faster. Like, so it's ways that you actually, they're subtle. And I practice yoga and I meditate and I thought I meditated before. I thought I was present. Like, it's just a subtle kind of, feeling of presence, a lot more presence and focus. Wow. The ability to focus is pretty great. And I think we all have to do a million things. But then the ability to compartmentalize and truly pour your focus into the task that is in front of you. Also, I would say I felt tremendously calm and balanced and dare I say rational. I don't know if others would have a different opinion, but
it's huge, the amount of more patience I have for my kids, and I don't snap. There used to be all this blowback from me feeling like crap the next day, and not even that necessarily, like not even like a serious hangover. I'm just talking like you're slightly dehydrated and didn't sleep well and not as motivated. And then, so that's like this compound interest of like not feeling your best. And then even more looking forward to the wine in the afternoon. And it's just like this cycle. Mm-hmm. What did you find, Candice? Anything else surprise you about how you physically or emotionally felt?
A couple of things I would say physically. For one, think about how many calories you're taking out of your diet. So like I did lose weight without doing really much of anything. Yeah. So that, is a bonus, it's kind of a bit more superficial, but you're taking a lot of calories out of your diet and a lot of sugar. which in fact, especially in the first couple of weeks, I found myself like craving sugar. It's like, somebody get me a cookie, right? Because I was missing all of that sugar in my system. So now I have a pint of the Ben and Jerry's non-dairy ice cream in my fridge. And, you know, sometimes I'll have a little scoop of that. Actually, just finished it last night. But so there is a little bit of that, but I would never normally eat ice cream because I was, you know, like, I don't really eat sugar. It's like, well, no, you drink your sugar. And then the other thing is, you know, I have had social interactions with friends, like, you know, things have lifted here a little bit. So I had a friend over that I hadn't seen in a while, and, you know, we drank water over dinner, you know, and then we shared a little bowl of ice cream and we had a tea, and it was lovely. And we were reflecting on it that, you know, normally, and she drove, and it was a weeknight, so we wouldn't have, you know, gotten drunk normally, but we would have had a couple of glasses of wine. And by the time, you know, you're well into your third glass, the conversation would have been different. It would have been a lot louder, a lot sloppier, you know, a lot less focused and engaged. And like what you touched on, Megan, I wouldn't have remembered parts of it, you know, or I wouldn't have had that clear recollection of it the next day. So yeah, those are some of the things that I've noticed that I wasn't expecting so much.
Yeah, well, I love that you touched on all that, but one thing that sticks out, because I think it's even more common with men that say they like don't like sweets, but they drink, right? Like my husband is very open about that being like his preferred dessert, if you will. But I think it's something that most people don't consider, you know, like you're consuming sugar, and it's a really easy way to drop a few pounds for sure, just by dropping, like, not changing anything else. And even adding in some ice cream, right? I eat way more fruit than I ever did before. Part of it, I'm sure, is I'm in the tropics and it's readily available and not that expensive, but it's something I always point out to clients, like, you know, get your sweet from nature's candy, if you will. So I eat sometimes like an entire bowl of berries in the afternoon, or, you know, I eat several apples throughout the day to get that sweetness. And yeah, I'm curious, like, the times that you wanted wine, was it like it was like a stressful moment? And then did you take any time to reflect, like, what is it that I actually need right now, and pick something else? Or what was that experience like?
Yeah, I would say it was after kind of an irritating sort of day, you know, where it's been a long day, it's been a long afternoon, and yeah, that feeling of I want that feeling of relaxation, because right now I feel like this, and I want that, you know, kind of unwinding. But I think part of it is habit as well. And it goes away. That feeling does go away. It's not, well, at least it did for me, thankfully. But, you know, like, you make a tea, or I pour a big glass of sparkling water. I drank a lot of sparkling water this month. And you just deal with it. When it's not an option, like when you've eliminated it as something that you can do, then I think your mind approaches it differently. It's like, you know, you have that moment of feeling like, I need a drink. And even just that term, I need a drink, is kind of a bit of a red flag, right? But then you sort of realize, well, you don't really need a drink. You need to, like, take a deep breath and maybe go, you know, walk away from your computer screen, or change your scenery or something.
Yeah, I find it's a really dangerous narrative. I mean, there's the mummy wine culture, but then there's also the, like, wellness culture that includes a glass of red in self-care. And I to this point, I haven't gone on my soapbox too much about it yet, but just genuinely suggested that maybe it's not. Maybe there's something else that you would feel much better after the fact and not just 15 minutes after, but the next morning when you wake up, there's other ways to deal. But I mean, it's just a shift in perspective and really picking up some other tools, like be it meditation, be it, a bath with a cup of tea, be it journaling, or just reaching out and talking to a friend, which I feel, I think that's one reason I've loved this group so much. Like, I have really amazing friends, but I feel like we've all been so saturated with other things with the pandemic, and I don't know. And also maybe we feel like we're keeping up with each other on social media because we see each other all the time, but that's not the same as a good old phone conversation. Genevieve, did you find any time where you were like, I need a drink, came to your forefront of your mind?
Okay, honestly, not really. And I was really surprised. Maybe that's because it was bookended but I never felt like I just have to make it through January. So I also did a meditation or a manifestation challenge with Gabby Bernstein during this time. So I was really focused. I actually got a little tired from working so much. And I was like, I need some, almost looking forward to that wine. So I will physically sit down to drink it. But I don't mean to gloss over it, because if you know the author Leo Babauta, he talks about the urge. And if you isolate and acknowledge the urge, and you kind of just, that's what it is. It's not actually the wine, right? And I'm a really big reader of the Stoics, and I love the idea of discipline. I love bringing discipline into your life. That's kind of the reward in and of itself. I've been practicing that for a really long time. So there's I really believe there's beauty in that. I can't say, though, to be fair, to answer your question, if I framed it as I'm never going to drink again, then I would probably think, oh my God, I need my wine. Right. So because it was a shorter time, because it was hey, this is what I'm doing for January. But I wanted to circle back to what Candice said. It's a good thing to keep an eye on, because if it does creep up again, and I think we all at the end of our 30s maybe kind of cut the BS a bit, and it's if you're drinking too much, you don't need to Google it, you don't need to look at some guideline, what you're doing. So I think we've all done things that have kind of justified and snaked around, but you know what it is, and those urges creep up, and just acknowledging them. But my biggest takeaway is just a heck of a lot more mindful about it instead of just reaching for it. And that in and of itself, I think, takes the urge down.
Yeah, that's such a good point with the urge. I've similar idea that Pema Chodron has. She talks about Shempa, and Shempa is that little hook of a moment when you decide what you're going to do next. And her message is, do something different. Just what is an alternative thing that I can do instead of continuing down the same path that the trigger causes a habit to always fall into. But I think I deeply believe that if it's at all coming to your psyche, and do I have a drinking problem? That is a good indication that you do. Whether you want to accept that terminology, it's another. But I think what's even more interesting is the amount of women that are seeing exactly like you two, that the benefits in doing something different that are in terms of your health, your performance, creativity, productivity, sleeping better, all of that. And it's not, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely a worthwhile just to try it. And what you're talking about with the triggers and urges, if even, whether it's alcohol, coffee, that would be an issue to give up. But anyway, just creating space between the trigger and your reaction. whether it's a person or a mindset or a reoccurring thought, or it's that urge to reach for the glass of wine, and then just creating a bit of space and just acknowledging what's happening in that space and how you're feeling. And then, I mean, if you want to have a glass of wine, have a glass of wine. But, and you do make a good point. If the question comes up for you, is this wrong? What I'm doing? Is this, and like, we're all human. We all get there when we get there. So I think there has to be a bit of grace and a bit of forgiveness of ourselves, or else you'll never heal. But creating space. I like this. This is like my takeaway from 2021 so far. Creating a bit more space between the trigger and the reaction.
Yeah, I like what you touched on, Jen, about the age, because I feel like in your 20s, I mean, most of us were probably wild and you're experimenting with drinking and you're drinking garbage for the most part, whatever you can get your hands on kind of thing. And then as you go into your 30s, you're in charge of your own life. You don't have to report to a parent or whatever, and you're making your own money, and you are introduced probably to kind of some nicer things like nicer wines and whatnot. And then I think that's where often for women in our age group, it then transitions into something different because you really like it, right? It's really good. But then it becomes then more of a habit. Mm-hmm. So my goal is, and the term mindful drinking is perfect. If this glass of wine is actually going to enhance my dining experience, then that glass of wine is worthwhile. If that glass of wine is, I'm drinking it because it's now 5:30 and it's drinking time, then that is a problem. And what you mentioned, Megan, about the theory of, just one glass of red wine a night. Kudos to the people in the world that can have one glass of wine. And I think that there are many of those people, but they're definitely the people that don't have that kind of dangerous relationship with alcohol. They can probably take it or leave it, and they can have just one glass. But for many of us, that's a harder thing to do. None is easier than just one most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, after being sober, I noticed lots of things now, like my relationship and all of the rationality around like not wasting alcohol, or like all the narratives that go around with the bottle's already open. Oh my God, what do we do with the bottle? It's not going to be as good. It's an expensive bottle. Won't be as good if we, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, now I'm totally comfortable pouring a half bottle of wine down. But obviously I have a different relationship with than even my husband, who's dramatically changed his as well, but still, very much embodies a wine drinker. But I think, like with anything, like once you've detoxed it out of your system, the process should be like, so you've already done all the work to have like a clear path forward to understand exactly what is my relationship with the substance. Mm-hmm. So now like have the glass of wine and don't feel at all bad about it, but also, it's an opportunity to like study your own relationship and understand like, what is it about? Like, do I really love the taste? Do I really love the numb? Do I really love the conversation I have? Like, what is it that this embodies? And, you probably drink it a bit slower and you won't need 3, 2 will be great. And like, or maybe not. But the point is that it can be a part of this process where you get to know your relationship with the substance better and make decisions based on that. Yeah. Anything?
My sister made a good point. We both live in Western Canada now, and we're both from Toronto, and obviously, and she brought up this great point that all could just be our group of friends, whatever. But anytime we would go out, it was always like centered around drinking. Whereas perhaps it's just the lifestyle out west, but it's always like, let's go for a hike. Let's go for a walk, like something outdoors. And we were like, God, yeah, there's so much liquid surrounding like patio, even coffee, right? It's just always like a thing, but the relationship, it definitely does change. And like to think that like I'm going to have a beautiful steak with a glass of water is not available to me. Like it's going to be a cab sauv, but what you just said, I totally enjoy it so much more. I was just posting like right before we hopped on, I'm like, I had such a great Mission Hill Chardonnay last night, but it was like one big, beautiful glass. Sorry, Candice, I know you're almost at that.
No, it's okay. That's a beautiful wine.
But really. I love Mission Hill, but then that's it. Then I just carried on. That wasn't like my night. It was like, okay, it was great. Now it's bath, book, bed. That's routine, right? For the kids, not me. But I wish. But it doesn't become like your story. I think that's the thing. It's not your story anymore. Like, what did you do last night? Drink. No, like that's done. That's kind of boring. And I think we've all done that. It's not just the three of us. There's a reason why a lot of people kind of shift into the mindful drinking. It's just taking it out of your story. Like, so it's not a main character is a really worthwhile practice. Even for a week makes a big difference.
Yeah. I love that wording. Candice, anything you want to leave us with about your experience or?
No, I mean, I'm going into the end of this excited, a little scared to be perfectly honest. But in a weird way, I mean, talking about it like this, I've never done that before. And, sort of really reflecting on it in this way has, I think, changed my thinking about it. So I'm hopeful that I can press on and not lose what I've gained in this month. So, but I know that the two of you will hold me accountable. So that's good.
Awesome. Well, maybe we have we'll update, we'll do another one of these in 6 months and see how we're doing with the mindful drinking. What do you think?
I love that. And can I just add I'm so grateful. And I would say to anyone listening, like find your group of women. It's everything. All of us have our own businesses and we're starting our things and doing our projects. And whether it's drinking or experiencing the pandemic, like finding your group, I just feel incredibly lucky. And if creating that network and like actually being active about it, I think that's my point, is just so tremendously beneficial for your mental health during these tough, interesting times.
Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, Jen, as well, like really seeking out those activities that don't revolve around alcohol, like hiking in nature or, joining a book club or whatever it is. Like those activities don't need to involve alcohol. So I'm looking forward to more of that.
More high-end mineral water events.
Yes. And tea.
And tea. Oh, I love tea. Good tea. All right. Well, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, ladies, for being here and for your honesty, your transparency. I think it's going to be informative, hopefully helpful for other women, and we'll see what the response is. But I would love to do a follow-up 6 months, or I don't know, we'll see how maybe your perspective has shifted, or if you're still maintaining true to the mindfulness and how that may have changed. So thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for listening to Energetically You. I hope that this episode has helped you to tune into your natural energy sources so that you feel more energized and focused throughout your day. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to help more ambitious women just like you accomplish their goals. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it on social or in your Instagram stories, and tag me at Megan Swan Wellness. See you soon.